The morning fog hung thick over the military airbase as Colonel Marcus "Red Talon" Rodriguez stepped out of his black sedan. His weathered boots hit the tarmac with purpose, each step echoing across the silent runway. After 15 years away from active duty, the legendary pilot had returned to the very place where his career began. The base hadn't changed much, but everything felt different now. Red Talon wasn't his real call sign back in the day. Marcus had earned that nickname during a classified mission over hostile territory when his aircraft's communications failed, and he had to rely on hand signals that looked like a red bird of prey swooping down on enemy positions. The name stuck, and soon everyone knew about the pilot who could navigate impossible situations with deadly precision. Marcus walked toward the command center, his civilian clothes making him stand out among the uniformed personnel. He had been called back for a special consultation about a new training program. The military needed someone with his unique experience to help design scenarios that would prepare pilots for the unexpected. His reputation preceded him everywhere he went. The years away from flying had been good to Marcus. He had started a small aviation consulting business, helping commercial airlines improve their safety protocols. His wife Sarah had been relieved when he left active duty. The constant deployments and dangerous missions had taken their toll on their marriage. Now, they had 2 teenage children who barely remembered their father's military days. As Marcus entered the command center, he was greeted by General Patricia Hayes, a sharp woman in her 50s who had heard stories about Red Talon since her academy days. She shook his hand firmly and led him to a conference room where several other officers waited. The meeting was supposed to be routine, but Marcus sensed something else in the air. "Colonel Rodriguez, thank you for coming," General Hayes began. "We've been following your work in the civilian sector. Your safety innovations have saved countless lives in commercial aviation. We're hoping to bring some of that expertise back to military training." Marcus nodded, but his attention was drawn to the large monitor displaying real-time flight data from the base. Something about the patterns seemed unusual. Years of experience had taught him to read flight movements like a language, and what he saw didn't look normal. "General, can you tell me about the current flight operations?" Marcus asked, pointing to the screen. "Those approach patterns look irregular." General Hayes exchanged glances with her staff. "We're conducting a joint training exercise with civilian aircraft today. Nothing too complex, just some coordination drills between military and commercial flights." Marcus studied the screen more carefully. His trained eye caught details that others might miss. The civilian aircraft were approaching from multiple directions, but their spacing was too tight for a normal exercise. Something was wrong, but he couldn't put his finger on what exactly. The meeting continued for another hour, with Marcus providing input on training scenarios and safety protocols. But his mind kept drifting back to those flight patterns. When the session ended, he asked if he could observe some of the training operations from the control tower. General Hayes agreed, and soon Marcus found himself in the air traffic control center, watching controllers manage the complex dance of aircraft in the sky above the base. The atmosphere was tense, more so than a routine training exercise would warrant. Controllers spoke in hushed, urgent tones, and Marcus noticed several security personnel stationed around the room. "This is a bigger operation than you described," Marcus said to General Hayes, who had accompanied him to the tower. "How many aircraft are involved?" "Approximately 70 civilian aircraft are participating in various phases of the exercise," she replied. "It's one of our largest coordination efforts." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. 70 aircraft was an enormous number for any training exercise. His instincts, honed by years of combat flying, were telling him that something was seriously wrong. He watched as controllers struggled to maintain safe separation between aircraft, their voices growing more strained with each passing minute. On the main radar screen, Marcus could see the full scope of the operation. Aircraft were converging on the airspace around the base from all directions. Some were commercial airliners. Others were smaller civilian planes. The coordination required for such an exercise would be incredibly complex under normal circumstances, but these weren't normal circumstances. As Marcus watched, he began to notice subtle anomalies in the aircraft movements. Some planes were deviating from their assigned flight paths. Others were not responding to controller instructions as quickly as they should. The entire situation was becoming increasingly chaotic. "General, I need to ask you something directly, Marcus said, his voice low and serious. Is this really just a training exercise? General Hayes hesitated before answering. The situation is evolving, Colonel. We may need your expertise in ways we didn't initially anticipate. That confirmed Marcus's suspicions. This wasn't a planned exercise at all. Something had gone wrong, and the military was dealing with a real crisis involving 70 civilian aircraft. His mind immediately began analyzing the possibilities. A coordinated hijacking seemed unlikely with so many planes involved. A technical failure affecting multiple aircraft was also improbable. As he continued watching the radar displays, Marcus began to piece together what might be happening. The aircraft weren't following normal flight patterns because they couldn't. Something was interfering with their navigation systems, forcing them to rely on ground control for guidance. But with 70 planes all needing assistance simultaneously, the controllers were being overwhelmed. The gravity of the situation hit Marcus like a physical blow. If these aircraft lost guidance entirely, the potential for mid-air collisions was enormous. 70 planes in the same general airspace, many of them large commercial airliners filled with passengers, represented thousands of lives hanging in the balance. How long has this been going on? Marcus asked. About 2 hours, General Hayes replied. We've managed to maintain control so far, but the situation is deteriorating. We need options, and we need them fast. Marcus looked around the control room, taking in the barely controlled chaos. Controllers were working frantically to keep aircraft separated, but their voices carried an edge of desperation. Red lights were beginning to appear on status boards, indicating critical situations developing across the airspace. The woman at the primary radar console looked up at General Hayes with obvious concern. Ma'am, we're approaching maximum capacity. If we get many more aircraft requesting emergency assistance, we won't be able to handle them all safely. Marcus stepped closer to examine the radar display. His years of combat experience had taught him to see patterns in chaos, to find order where others saw only confusion. As he studied the positions and movements of the 70 aircraft, a plan began forming in his mind. It was a dangerous plan, one that would require precise timing and flawless execution. But it might be the only way to prevent a catastrophic loss of life. Marcus had spent his career making split-second decisions in life-or-death situations. This was no different, except the stakes were higher than anything he had faced before. General, Marcus said, his voice calm but urgent, I think I know what's happening, and I might have a solution. But you're not going to like it. And it's going to require trusting me completely. General Hayes looked at him intently. She had heard the stories about Red Talon's unconventional methods and his ability to find solutions where others saw only problems. If anyone could help them navigate this crisis, it would be the legendary pilot standing before her. The next few minutes would determine the fate of 70 aircraft and the thousands of lives aboard them. Marcus felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried him through countless dangerous missions. Red Talon was about to take flight again, not in an aircraft, but in the most critical mission of his career. As alarms began sounding throughout the control tower, indicating that several aircraft were now in immediate danger, Marcus knew there was no time left for hesitation. The crisis that had been building for 2 hours was about to reach its breaking point, and only his experience and instincts stood between order and catastrophe. The fog outside had lifted, revealing a clear blue sky filled with aircraft in distress. Soon, that same sky would either witness one of the greatest aviation disasters in history, or the most remarkable rescue operation ever attempted. The choice was now in the hands of a man who had earned his reputation by doing the impossible when failure wasn't an option. Marcus looked at General Hayes and nodded grimly. Let's get started. Marcus moved quickly to the main radar console, his eyes scanning the complex display that showed the positions of all 70 aircraft. Each blip represented hundreds of lives, and the spacing between them was becoming dangerously tight. The controllers looked exhausted and overwhelmed, their usual precision replaced by barely controlled panic. Show me the communication logs for the last hour, Marcus requested, his voice carrying the authority that came from years of command experience. The lead controller, a young sergeant named Williams, quickly pulled up the requested data on a secondary screen. As Marcus reviewed the communications, the pattern became clear. The aircraft hadn't lost their navigation systems randomly. There was a systematic failure affecting GPS signals across a wide area, likely caused by some form of electronic interference. The planes were essentially flying blind, dependent entirely on ground control for guidance. "This isn't equipment failure," Marcus announced to General Hayes. "Someone is jamming GPS signals across the entire region. These aircraft are trapped in our airspace because they can't navigate anywhere else safely." The implications were staggering. Commercial aircraft relied heavily on GPS for navigation, especially during approach and landing phases. Without those signals, pilots had to fall back on older navigation methods that required much more time and coordination with ground control. With 70 aircraft all needing this level of assistance simultaneously, the system was breaking down. "Do we know the source of the jamming?" General Hayes asked. "Not yet," replied Major Thompson, the base's intelligence officer. "We're working on locating it. But the signal appears to be coming from multiple sources, making it difficult to pinpoint." Marcus studied the radar screen again, this time focusing on the movement patterns rather than just the positions. His combat experience had taught him to think like an enemy, to anticipate moves before they happened. What he saw made his blood run cold. The aircraft weren't just randomly distributed in the airspace. They were being subtly herded into specific areas, guided by the very GPS interference that was supposed to be causing chaos. Someone was orchestrating this entire situation, turning the 70 aircraft into unwitting participants in something much larger than a simple navigation failure. "General, this isn't just jamming," Marcus said urgently. "This is a coordinated attack. Someone is using the aircraft as cover for something else. We need to evacuate this airspace immediately." But even as he said it, Marcus knew evacuation wasn't possible. The aircraft couldn't navigate safely without ground control, and there weren't enough controllers or airports in the region to handle 70 emergency landings simultaneously. They were trapped in a carefully orchestrated trap. Sergeant Williams looked up from his console with growing alarm. "Sir, I'm getting reports of unauthorized aircraft entering our airspace from the east. They're not responding to radio calls, and they're not showing up on our friend or foe identification systems." Marcus felt his heart rate spike. This was the real threat. The 70 civilian aircraft were being used as camouflage, making it impossible for air defense systems to engage the unauthorized intruders without risking massive civilian casualties. It was a brilliant and ruthless strategy. "How many unauthorized contacts?" Marcus demanded. "At least 6, possibly more," Williams replied. "They're staying close to the civilian traffic, using them as shields." General Hayes was already on the phone with higher command, but Marcus could see from her expression that options were limited. The rules of engagement prohibited firing on aircraft when civilian lives were at immediate risk. The attackers had created the perfect scenario to penetrate restricted airspace. Marcus's mind raced through possible solutions. Traditional military responses were off the table due to the civilian aircraft, but there might be another way, one that would require him to dust off skills he hadn't used in 15 years. "General, I need a helicopter," Marcus said suddenly. "Something fast and maneuverable." "What are you planning?" she asked, though her tone suggested she was afraid of the answer. "I'm going to do what I do best," Marcus replied. "I'm going to get up there and sort this mess out personally." The control room fell silent except for the constant chatter of radio communications. Everyone understood the implications. Marcus was proposing to fly into the most congested and dangerous airspace imaginable, where 70 confused civilian aircraft were trying to avoid colliding with each other, and 6 hostile aircraft were using them as human shields. "Colonel, with respect, you haven't flown a military mission in 15 years, Major Thompson pointed out. "This situation requires current pilots with recent combat experience." Marcus turned to face him directly. "Major, I've been flying longer than you've been alive, and I've dealt with situations that would give your current pilots nightmares. The difference is, I know how to think outside standard procedures when lives are at stake." General Hayes studied Marcus's face, seeing the determination and confidence that had made him legendary. She had read his service record, knew about the impossible missions he had completed when others had failed. If anyone could navigate this crisis, it would be the man standing before her. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. Marcus pointed to the radar screen. "The hostile aircraft are staying close to civilian traffic to avoid being targeted. But that also limits their maneuverability. If I can get up there and force them to break away from the civilians, your air defense systems can engage them safely." "And how do you plan to force 6 hostile aircraft to do anything?" Major Thompson asked skeptically. Marcus smiled grimly. "By being more unpredictable than they are. They're expecting conventional military responses. They're not expecting a single helicopter pilot to come after them directly." The plan was insane by any reasonable standard. A helicopter against 6 potentially armed aircraft in crowded airspace was suicide. But conventional wisdom hadn't gotten them anywhere, and the situation was deteriorating rapidly. As Marcus spoke, more red warning lights appeared on the status boards. "We have a collision alert," Sergeant Williams announced. 2 civilian aircraft are on intersecting courses, 15 miles northeast of the base. Everyone in the control room watched in horror as 2 blips on the radar screen moved steadily toward each other. The controllers were frantically trying to raise the pilots on radio, but the communication channels were becoming increasingly congested as more aircraft reported emergencies. "Flight 447. Turn left heading 270 immediately." Williams called into his microphone. "Flight 782. Climb to flight level 250. And turn right. Heading 090. The aircraft responded, but slowly. Without GPS guidance, pilots had to rely on older instruments and visual references, making quick course changes dangerous. The 2 blips continued their deadly convergence, now less than 5 miles apart. Marcus grabbed a spare headset and plugged into the communication system. "Flight 447. This is Red Talon on emergency frequency. Level your wings and look for traffic at your 2 o'clock position. You should see a white aircraft slightly below you." There was a moment of silence before the pilot responded. "Red Talon? Is that really you? This is Captain Martinez, 447 Heavy. I can see the traffic. What are your instructions?" Marcus felt a surge of recognition. Captain Martinez had been a young Air Force pilot when Marcus was still active. The man would trust his voice, which could make all the difference in a crisis situation. "Martinez, reduce power to idle and begin a gentle descent. Don't turn yet. Just go down. The other aircraft will pass above you." Marcus's voice was calm and authoritative, cutting through the chaos of multiple radio conversations. "Copy that, Red Talon. Beginning descent." On the radar screen, everyone watched as the potential collision was averted by mere hundreds of feet, but it was a temporary victory. 6 more similar situations were developing across the airspace, and the controllers were reaching their breaking point. "That's why I need to get up there," Marcus said to General Hayes. "These pilots know my voice. They trust me. From a helicopter, I can provide direct guidance and coordinate the separation of civilian traffic while dealing with the hostile aircraft." General Hayes nodded slowly. "What kind of helicopter do you need?" "Something with good communications, equipment, and excellent maneuverability. And I'll need a weapons system, just in case diplomatic solutions don't work with our uninvited guests." Within minutes, preparations were underway for what would either be the most successful rescue operation in aviation history or the most spectacular failure. As Marcus headed toward the flight line, he could hear the continuing chatter of radio communications behind him. 70 aircraft were still in danger, and 6 hostile intruders were using them as shields for unknown purposes. The helicopter waiting for him was a modified military aircraft equipped with advanced communication systems and defensive weapons. As Marcus performed his pre-flight inspection, muscle memory took over. His hands moved automatically over the controls and instruments, checking systems he hadn't touched in years but knew as well as his own heartbeat. The crew chief, a seasoned sergeant named Rodriguez, helped Marcus into his flight gear. "Sir, the bird is ready to go. All systems are green, and we've loaded the communication package you requested." Marcus climbed into the pilot's seat and began the startup sequence. The familiar whine of turbine engines spooling up brought back a flood of memories from his combat days. But this mission was different. This time, he wasn't trying to destroy targets or complete objectives. This time, he was trying to save lives. As the helicopter lifted off the tarmac, Marcus could see the scope of the crisis from above. The sky was filled with aircraft, their contrails creating a complex web against the blue backdrop. Somewhere among those 70 civilian planes were 6 hostile aircraft with unknown intentions, and somewhere out there was the source of the GPS jamming that had created this entire nightmare. Marcus keyed his radio and called the control tower. "Control, this is Red Talon airborne and climbing. I'm entering the traffic area now. Start vectoring me toward the first priority target." The voice of Sergeant Williams came back immediately. "Red Talon, we have a developing situation 12 miles northeast of your position. 3 civilian aircraft are converging on the same point, and one of the unidentified contacts is in their immediate vicinity." Marcus banked the helicopter toward the northeast, his eyes scanning the sky ahead. In the distance, he could see the glint of sunlight reflecting off aircraft surfaces. As he got closer, the magnitude of the challenge became clear. The aircraft were spread across multiple altitudes and headings, creating a 3-dimensional puzzle that would require all of his skill to solve. "This is Red Talon," he announced on the emergency frequency. "All aircraft in the northeast sector. This is Colonel Rodriguez coordinating traffic separation. I need everyone to follow my instructions exactly as given. Lives depend on it." The scene that greeted Marcus as he approached the northeast sector was unlike anything he had encountered in his military career. 3 large commercial aircraft were converging on the same airspace from different directions, their pilots clearly struggling without GPS guidance. Below and between them, a smaller aircraft moved with suspicious precision, its flight path too deliberate for a plane experiencing navigation problems. Marcus immediately recognized the tactical situation. The hostile aircraft was using the confusion of the civilian planes to mask its own movements, staying in their radar shadows and communication blind spots. It was a sophisticated operation that required detailed planning and real-time coordination. "Flight 892, this is Red Talon," Marcus called to the nearest commercial aircraft. "I need you to reduce speed immediately and begin a left turn heading 180. There's traffic converging on your position." "Red Talon, Flight 892, roger that. We're having navigation problems. Our GPS is completely out, and we're flying on backup instruments only." Marcus could hear the stress in the pilot's voice. Commercial airline pilots were trained for equipment failures, but losing all GPS guidance while sharing airspace with dozens of other aircraft was beyond normal emergency procedures. They were essentially flying blind in a crowded sky. 892. "I understand your situation. I'm going to guide you through this, step by step. Trust my instructions and don't deviate from what I tell you." Marcus's voice carried the calm authority that had made him famous among pilots who had flown with him. As Flight 892 began its turn, Marcus focused on the second commercial aircraft, a wide-body passenger plane carrying over 300 people. "Flight 1205, Red Talon here. I need you to climb immediately to flight level 280. You have traffic below you that's not responding to normal separation procedures." The pilot of Flight 1205 responded quickly. "Red Talon, this is Captain Stevens on 1205, climbing to 280. "Sir, are you the same Red Talon from the stories we heard in flight school?" "Focus on flying right now, Stevens. We'll swap stories later," Marcus replied, though he felt a brief moment of satisfaction that his reputation had endured. 1205. As you climb, keep an eye out for any aircraft that seems to be following your movements. Report anything unusual immediately. Marcus was now close enough to visually identify the suspicious aircraft. It was a modified business jet, sleek and fast, with unusual antenna arrays that confirmed his suspicions about its role in the GPS jamming. The aircraft was staying perfectly positioned to avoid detection while monitoring the movements of the civilian planes. "Control, this is Red Talon." Marcus radioed back to the tower. "I have visual confirmation on one of the hostile contacts. It's a modified business jet with electronic warfare equipment. This bird is definitely part of the jamming operation. General Hayes's voice came back immediately. Can you engage it safely? Marcus studied the tactical situation. The hostile aircraft was currently flying between two civilian planes, making any aggressive action impossible without risking innocent lives. But he had an idea that might force the intruder into the open. Negative on direct engagement, but I'm going to try something. Stand by. Marcus maneuvered his helicopter to a position directly above the suspicious aircraft, matching its speed and altitude. From this position, he could shadow the intruder while staying clear of the civilian traffic. It was a dangerous game of three-dimensional chess, with lives hanging in the balance. Unknown aircraft flying between Flight 892 and Flight 1205, Marcus announced on the international emergency frequency. This is United States Air Force Colonel Rodriguez. You are operating illegally in restricted airspace. Identify yourself immediately and comply with air traffic control instructions. The response was immediate and unexpected. Instead of answering, the hostile aircraft suddenly accelerated and climbed sharply, breaking away from the civilian traffic. Marcus realized the pilot had panicked at being directly challenged, abandoning the careful positioning that had kept him safe from engagement. Control. Hostile contact is breaking away from civilian traffic, climbing through flight level 320. Marcus reported. You are clear to engage. But before ground-based air defense systems could respond, Marcus saw something that changed everything. As the hostile aircraft climbed away from the civilian planes, it released several small objects that immediately began emitting intense electronic signals. The GPS jamming that had been affecting the entire region suddenly intensified dramatically. All aircraft. All aircraft. This is Red Talon on emergency frequency. Marcus, broadcast. We have a significant increase in electronic interference. All pilots switch to backup navigation systems immediately and maintain current headings until further notice. The situation had just become exponentially worse. The hostile aircraft had deployed additional jamming devices, creating a zone of electronic chaos that would make navigation nearly impossible for any aircraft in the area. Marcus realized this had been the plan all along. To use the civilian aircraft as bait to draw air defense attention while deploying a sophisticated electronic warfare system. Marcus's helicopter was also affected by the increased jamming. His advanced navigation systems began showing erratic readings, and some of his communication channels became filled with static. He was now flying in the same degraded environment as the civilian aircraft he was trying to help. Flight 892. Can you still hear me? Marcus called. Barely, Red Talon. The interference is getting much worse. We're having trouble maintaining heading without GPS reference. Marcus looked around the sky and saw the scale of the crisis developing. With the increased electronic interference, the 70 civilian aircraft were becoming completely dependent on visual navigation and ground control guidance. But the air traffic control system was never designed to handle this level of degraded operations. From his position in the helicopter, Marcus could see aircraft beginning to deviate from their assigned courses as pilots struggled with unreliable instruments. Some planes were climbing when they should have been descending. Others were turning in the wrong directions. The carefully maintained separation between aircraft was breaking down rapidly. Control. This is Red Talon. We need to implement emergency procedures immediately. The electronic interference has reached critical levels. Standard air traffic control is no longer viable. General Hayes responded from the tower. What do you recommend? Marcus quickly assessed the situation. Traditional air traffic control relied on radar tracking and radio communication, both of which were being severely degraded by the electronic warfare attack. But there was another way. One that harked back to the early days of aviation when pilots had to rely on visual cues and direct communication. I'm going to establish a visual control system, Marcus announced. I'll position myself where I can see multiple aircraft and provide direct guidance to each pilot. It's old school, but it might be our only option. It was an incredibly risky plan. Marcus would essentially become a flying air traffic controller, using his helicopter's mobility to position himself between aircraft and provide visual guidance. He would have to coordinate the movements of dozens of planes while avoiding collisions himself. Red Talon. That's an extremely dangerous proposition, General Hayes warned. You'll be flying in the middle of congested airspace with degraded navigation systems. General, we don't have a choice. These aircraft are going to start colliding with each other if we don't take immediate action. I can see what's happening up here, and traditional control methods aren't working. Marcus began implementing his plan immediately. He positioned his helicopter at a central point where he could observe multiple civilian aircraft. Then began issuing precise guidance to each pilot. Flight 623, I can see you from my helicopter. You're currently heading toward another aircraft. Turn right 20 degrees and hold that heading. Flight 1847, you're climbing too rapidly. Level off immediately and begin a gentle descent. Flight 441, there's traffic directly ahead of you at the same altitude. Begin an immediate left turn and climb 500 feet. The system worked, but barely. Marcus found himself constantly in motion, repositioning his helicopter to maintain visual contact with different groups of aircraft. His radio was busy with continuous communication as he guided plane after plane away from potential collisions. But even as he managed to prevent immediate disasters, Marcus could see that the situation was unsustainable. More hostile aircraft were appearing on the periphery of the airspace, and the electronic interference was continuing to intensify. The original attack had been just the opening move in a larger operation. Control, I count at least 4 more unidentified aircraft entering our airspace from different directions, Marcus reported. They're coordinating their approach with the electronic jamming. This is a full-scale assault. The realization hit everyone in the control tower simultaneously. The 70 civilian aircraft weren't just victims of an electronic warfare attack. They were being held hostage. The hostile forces had created a situation where any military response would inevitably result in massive civilian casualties. Marcus understood the strategic brilliance of the attack. The enemy had essentially turned civilian aircraft into human shields, while deploying electronic warfare systems that could paralyze air operations across the entire region. It was a new form of warfare that exploited the very systems designed to keep civilian aviation safe. Flight 1205. This is Red Talon. I need you to listen carefully. Do not deviate from your current heading under any circumstances. There are hostile aircraft in the area, and they may try to force you to change course. Captain Stevens responded immediately. Red Talon, understood. We'll maintain heading. How many people are you trying to save up here? Marcus did quick mental calculation. 70 civilian aircraft of various sizes, from small private planes to large commercial airliners. The passenger count was staggering. Stevens, we're looking at approximately 4,000 to 5,000 people in the air right now. Maybe more. The number hung in the air like a physical weight. Marcus had saved lives before, but never on this scale. The responsibility was overwhelming, but he pushed the thoughts aside. There would be time for reflection later. Right now, he had to focus on keeping those aircraft separated and finding a way to neutralize the electronic warfare attack. As he continued coordinating the movements of civilian aircraft, Marcus began developing a more comprehensive plan. The hostile forces had created a complex tactical situation, but they had also revealed their positions and capabilities. If he could somehow turn the tables on them, he might be able to end this crisis and save thousands of lives. The key was understanding that this wasn't just about the aircraft in the air. This was about the electronic warfare systems that were making navigation impossible. If he could eliminate those systems, the civilian aircraft could return to normal operations and land safely. But first, he had to keep them alive long enough to implement whatever solution he could devise. And with more hostile aircraft continuing to enter the airspace, time was running out rapidly. Marcus had been in the air for nearly an hour, continuously maneuvering his helicopter between dozens of civilian aircraft while coordinating their movements. His shoulders ached from the constant tension, and his voice was growing hoarse from non-stop radio communication. But he could see that his improvised traffic control system was working. No collisions had occurred, and the civilian aircraft were maintaining relatively safe separation. However, the bigger picture was growing more ominous by the minute. The hostile aircraft that had initially deployed the electronic jamming devices were now being joined by additional contacts. Marcus counted at least 10 unidentified aircraft operating in the area, all of them moving with military precision and coordination. "Control, this is Red Talon," Marcus called to the tower. "I need a complete tactical picture." "How many hostiles are we tracking now?" Major Thompson's voice came back with grim news. "Red Talon, we're showing 12 unidentified contacts, possibly more. They're spread across the entire operational area, and they're all equipped with electronic warfare capabilities." Marcus felt his heart sink. 12 hostile aircraft represented a significant military operation, far beyond what any terrorist group could mount. This was a coordinated attack by a professional military force, using civilian aircraft as both shields and hostages. As if reading his thoughts, General Hayes came on the radio. "Colonel, we've been analyzing the electronic signatures from the jamming equipment. The technology is advanced, possibly state-of-the-art military hardware. This isn't some improvised terrorist operation." The implications were staggering. A foreign military force had somehow managed to position 12 aircraft in American airspace, deploy sophisticated electronic warfare systems, and effectively take thousands of civilian lives hostage. It was an act of war disguised as a navigation emergency. Marcus continued his aerial dance between the civilian aircraft, but his mind was working on a larger strategy. The hostile forces had created a brilliant tactical situation for themselves, but they had also committed to a course of action that limited their options. They had to maintain the electronic jamming to keep the civilian aircraft trapped, but doing so also revealed their positions. "Flight 789, this is Red Talon. I need you to execute a left turn heading 270. There's an unidentified aircraft approaching your position from the southeast." The pilot of Flight 789 acknowledged the instruction, but his voice carried new tension. "Red Talon? Are we in some kind of military situation here? My passengers are getting nervous about all the unusual radio traffic." Marcus had been dreading this moment. The civilian pilots were beginning to understand that their navigation problems weren't caused by equipment failures. They were starting to realize they were trapped in the middle of a military operation. 789. Maintain normal operations and keep your passengers calm. "We're handling the situation. Just follow my guidance and everything will be fine." It wasn't entirely truthful, but Marcus couldn't afford to have panic spreading among the civilian aircraft. Frightened pilots made mistakes, and mistakes in this environment would be fatal. As Marcus continued coordinating traffic, he noticed something interesting about the movement patterns of the hostile aircraft. They weren't just maintaining positions around the civilian planes. They were herding them toward specific areas of the airspace. The entire operation was designed to concentrate the civilian aircraft in a smaller area, making them easier to control. "Control, the hostiles are shepherding the civilian traffic toward a specific zone," Marcus reported. "I think they're trying to concentrate all the aircraft in one area for some reason." "What kind of reason?" General Hayes asked. Marcus studied the tactical display on his helicopter's screen, looking for patterns in the hostile aircraft movements. Slowly, a terrifying possibility began to emerge. "General, I think they're planning to create a mass casualty event. If they can get all 70 aircraft concentrated in a small area, then disable their ability to navigate completely, they could cause multiple simultaneous collisions." The silence on the radio was deafening. Everyone in the control tower understood the implications. A coordinated destruction of 70 civilian aircraft would represent one of the worst aviation disasters in history, killing thousands of innocent people and dealing a devastating blow to American confidence in air travel safety. "We cannot allow that to happen," General Hayes said firmly. "What are our options?" Marcus was already formulating a plan, though it was perhaps the most dangerous thing he had ever attempted. "General, I need to take out the electronic warfare systems. Without the jamming, the civilian aircraft can navigate normally and get out of the trap. How do you propose to do that? The jamming equipment is distributed across multiple aircraft, and they're all staying close to civilian traffic. I'm going to force them to separate from the civilians," Marcus replied. If I can make them choose between maintaining their electronic warfare mission and protecting themselves, they might break formation. It was a desperate gamble. Marcus was proposing to attack military aircraft while flying a helicopter in the middle of congested civilian airspace. The margin for error was essentially zero, and the consequences of failure would be catastrophic. But as Marcus looked around the sky at the dozens of aircraft filled with innocent people, he knew he had no choice. The hostile forces were implementing their plan methodically, and time was running out. If he didn't act soon, thousands of people would die. Control, I'm gonna need some backup. Can you get any fighter aircraft to the area? Negative, Red Talon. The electronic jamming is affecting our air defense radar systems. We can't safely vector fighters into the area without risking civilian casualties. Marcus was on his own. One helicopter against 12 military aircraft, with thousands of civilian lives hanging in the balance. The odds were impossible. But he had faced impossible odds before. All civilian aircraft. This is Red Talon on emergency frequency, Marcus announced. I need everyone to listen carefully. There are hostile military aircraft in our airspace. They are not a direct threat to you. But I need you to follow my instructions exactly. Do not deviate from the headings I give you under any circumstances. The responses came back immediately from dozens of pilots, their voices carrying new urgency and fear. They understood now that they were in the middle of a military conflict, trapped between forces beyond their control. Marcus began implementing his plan. He started by identifying the hostile aircraft that were most isolated from civilian traffic. These would be his first targets. If he could take out even a few of the jamming platforms, it might create enough gaps in the electronic interference to allow some civilian aircraft to escape. Flight 1456. This is Red Talon. Execute an immediate right turn heading 090 and climb to flight level 300. There's an unidentified aircraft in your area that I need to deal with. As the civilian aircraft moved away, Marcus had a clear view of his first target. It was a modified military transport aircraft. Bristling with electronic warfare antennas, the aircraft was maintaining a steady course, apparently confident that its proximity to civilian traffic made it immune from attack. Marcus armed his helicopter's weapons systems for the first time since returning to military service. The familiar weight of combat responsibility settled on his shoulders like an old coat. He had done this before, but never with so much at stake. Control, this is Red Talon, engaging hostile contact number 1. Marcus dove his helicopter toward the hostile aircraft, using the terrain below to mask his approach. The enemy pilot didn't see him coming until the last moment, when Marcus's helicopter popped up directly behind the transport aircraft. The engagement was brief but decisive. Marcus's experience and superior positioning gave him a critical advantage. The hostile aircraft, damaged and unable to maintain its electronic warfare mission, broke away from the civilian traffic and headed for the border. One down, Marcus reported. Electronic interference is decreasing in the northwest sector, but the victory was short-lived. The remaining hostile aircraft immediately began repositioning themselves, moving closer to civilian traffic to prevent further attacks. They had learned from their comrades' mistake and were adapting their tactics. Worse, Marcus could see that the hostile forces were accelerating their timeline. Instead of gradually herding the civilian aircraft into a concentrated area, they were now actively forcing rapid course changes that would bring multiple planes into collision courses. Multiple aircraft, this is Red Talon. I'm seeing forced convergence in the northeast sector. Flight 823. Turn hard left immediately. Flight 1674. Emergency descent to flight level 250. Flight 992. Execute a 180-degree turn and climb. The situation was becoming chaotic as the hostile forces abandoned subtlety for direct action. Marcus found himself racing between different groups of aircraft, trying to prevent collisions while identifying opportunities to engage more hostile targets. Red Talon, this is Flight 1205. Captain Stevens called. We're being forced toward other traffic by an unidentified aircraft. It's staying right behind us and matching our every maneuver. Marcus looked toward Flight 1205's position, and saw the tactical situation developing. One of the hostile aircraft was using the large passenger plane as a shield, while simultaneously forcing it toward a collision course with other civilian traffic. "Stevens, maintain your current heading. I'm coming to assist." Marcus banked his helicopter sharply toward Flight 1205, but he could see he might not arrive in time. The hostile aircraft was expertly using the passenger plane's bulk to shield itself while driving it toward disaster. That's when Marcus made a decision that would either save hundreds of lives or end his own. He pushed his helicopter to its maximum speed and positioned himself directly between the hostile aircraft and Flight 1205. "Stevens, when I give the word, execute a hard right turn and climb. I'm going to clear your tail. I'm going to clear your tail." It was the most dangerous maneuver Marcus had ever attempted. He was essentially using his helicopter as a barrier between a hostile military aircraft and a passenger plane carrying 300 innocent people. If his timing was wrong by even a few seconds, the collision would kill everyone involved. "Now, Stevens, hard right and climb." As Flight 1205 turned away, Marcus engaged the hostile aircraft at point-blank range. The enemy pilot, surprised by the aggressive maneuver, broke away from his pursuit of the civilian plane, but in doing so, he exposed himself to Marcus's weapons systems. The second hostile aircraft went down in flames, its electronic warfare equipment destroyed. The GPS jamming in that sector immediately decreased, allowing several civilian aircraft to regain normal navigation capabilities. But Marcus's helicopter had taken damage in the close-range engagement. Warning lights were flashing across his instrument panel, and he could feel the aircraft's handling becoming sluggish. "Control, this is Red Talon. I've taken damage but am still operational. 2 hostile contacts down, electronic interference continuing to decrease." General Hayes's voice came back with new urgency. "Red Talon, we're detecting incoming military aircraft from multiple directions. This operation is about to get much larger. You need to get those civilians out of there immediately." Marcus looked around the sky at the remaining aircraft, both civilian and hostile. The battle was far from over, but he had created openings in the electronic warfare coverage that some of the civilian aircraft could exploit. Now he had to coordinate their escape while dealing with what appeared to be reinforcements for the hostile forces. The next few minutes would determine whether his desperate gamble would save thousands of lives or lead to the very catastrophe he was trying to prevent. Marcus's damaged helicopter shuddered as he fought to maintain control while coordinating the escape of dozens of civilian aircraft. The destruction of 2 hostile jamming platforms had created corridors of clear navigation signals. But these openings were temporary. The remaining enemy aircraft were already repositioning to close the gaps. All aircraft in the northwest and northeast sectors, Marcus broadcast on the emergency frequency. "You now have partial GPS capability. I need you to immediately proceed to your nearest alternate airports. Do not attempt to return to your original destinations." The response was immediate, as pilots began reporting restored navigation capabilities. But Marcus could see on his tactical display that only about 20 of the 70 aircraft were in areas with reduced jamming. The majority were still trapped in zones of intense electronic interference. "Control, this is Red Talon. I need a complete list of all available airports within 100 miles. We're going to have to scatter these aircraft across multiple facilities." General Hayes responded quickly. "Sending you the list now, Colonel. But we have a bigger problem. Our long-range radar is detecting at least 2 squadrons of military aircraft approaching from the east. Estimated time of arrival is 15 minutes. Marcus felt his blood run cold. 2 squadrons meant at least 24 additional hostile aircraft. Combined with the 10 remaining jamming platforms, it would create an impossible tactical situation. The civilian aircraft would be completely trapped with no possibility of escape. "General, those reinforcements are coming to finish the job. Once they arrive, they'll have enough jamming platforms to completely black out navigation across the entire region. Then they can cause mass collisions at will." As if to emphasize the point, Marcus saw 3 civilian aircraft in the central sector beginning to converge on the same point. The hostile forces were accelerating their timeline, trying to create casualties before their reinforcements arrived. Flight 567, Flight 889, and Flight 1234, Marcus called urgently. You are on converging courses. All 3 aircraft execute emergency separation maneuvers immediately, but the electronic jamming in that sector was too intense. Only one of the 3 pilots could hear Marcus's transmission clearly. The other 2 were flying blind, following compass headings that were being distorted by the electronic warfare systems. Marcus made a split-second decision that went against every principle of tactical flying. He dove his damaged helicopter directly into the formation of 3 aircraft, using his position and radio to provide immediate guidance to each pilot. Flight 567. I'm the helicopter directly below you. Turn left and follow my position. 889. Climb immediately. I can see traffic at your altitude. 1,234. Reduce speed and begin a right turn. It was insanely dangerous. Marcus was flying a damaged aircraft in the middle of 3 large civilian planes, any one of which could destroy his helicopter if their pilots made the slightest error. But it was the only way to prevent a 3-way collision that would kill hundreds of people. Slowly, carefully, Marcus guided the 3 aircraft apart. His helicopter served as a visual reference point, allowing the pilots to orient themselves when their instruments were unreliable. It was aviation at its most fundamental level. One pilot helping others navigate by sight and sound. That's it. Maintain separation and proceed to your alternate airports, Marcus instructed. Good flying, everyone, but the success was costly. Marcus's helicopter had used precious fuel in the aggressive maneuvering, and the damage from his earlier engagement was getting worse. Warning lights indicated multiple system failures, and his communications equipment was becoming intermittent. Control, this is Red Talon. My aircraft is severely damaged. I may not be able to maintain operations much longer. Red Talon, can you return to base for another aircraft? General Hayes asked. Marcus looked around the sky at the remaining 50 civilian aircraft, most of them still trapped in zones of intense jamming. The hostile reinforcements would arrive in less than 10 minutes. There wasn't time for him to land, switch aircraft, and return to the operational area. Negative, Control. If I leave now, these people are dead. I'm staying until the job is finished. It was a death sentence, and everyone on the radio frequency knew it. Marcus's helicopter couldn't survive much longer with its current damage, and he was about to face overwhelming odds when the hostile reinforcements arrived. But he had made his choice. Copy that, Red Talon, General Hayes said, her voice heavy with emotion. For what it's worth, you've already saved more lives today than most people save in a lifetime. Marcus began implementing what he knew would be his final tactical plan. With limited time and a failing aircraft, he had to create the maximum possible disruption to the hostile jamming network. The only way to do that was to target the command and control aircraft that were coordinating the electronic warfare operation. Control, I need you to identify the primary jamming control aircraft. It will be the one with the most sophisticated antenna array, probably staying at a higher altitude than the others. Major Thompson responded after a few moments. Red Talon, we think we've identified it. There's a large aircraft at flight level 400, approximately 20 miles southeast of your position. It's been maintaining a steady orbit and appears to be coordinating the movements of other hostile contacts. Marcus turned his helicopter toward the southeast, climbing despite his aircraft's protests. Every system was showing red warning lights now, and he could feel the helicopter becoming increasingly unstable. But he had one more mission to complete. As he climbed toward the command aircraft, Marcus began broadcasting on all frequencies. All civilian aircraft. This is Red Talon. In approximately 5 minutes, there may be a significant disruption to the electronic jamming. When that happens, your navigation systems should return to normal operation. Immediately proceed to your nearest airports and land as quickly as possible. The command aircraft came into visual range just as Marcus's helicopter began experiencing critical system failures. The enemy aircraft was indeed a sophisticated platform, bristling with communication and electronic warfare equipment. It was also heavily defended, with escort fighters positioned around it. Marcus knew he wouldn't survive an attack on such a well-defended target, but he also knew that destroying the command aircraft would collapse the entire jamming network, freeing the remaining 50 civilian aircraft to escape. Control. This is Red Talon beginning final approach on primary target. Tell my wife and kids that I love them. General Hayes's voice cracked as she responded. Colonel, there has to be another way. There isn't time, General. Those reinforcements will be here in 5 minutes. This is the only chance. Marcus pushed his failing helicopter to its maximum speed, diving toward the command aircraft from above. The escort fighters saw him coming, but they hesitated, apparently unsure whether a single damaged helicopter posed a real threat to their heavily armed formation. That hesitation was all Marcus needed. He closed the distance rapidly, using his years of combat experience to position himself for maximum effect. The escort fighters finally engaged, but it was too late. Marcus's final attack destroyed the command aircraft's electronic warfare systems in a spectacular explosion. Immediately, the coordinated jamming that had trapped the civilian aircraft began to collapse. Across the sky, pilots reported that their navigation systems were coming back online. GPS signals restored. Came the call from Flight 1205. We have normal navigation capability. Same here, reported Flight 892. All systems are green. Red Talon. You did it. But there was no response from Marcus's helicopter. The damaged aircraft had finally succumbed to the stress of combat, its systems failing completely. Marcus managed to transmit one final message before his radio went dead. All aircraft cleared for normal navigation. Proceed to nearest airports immediately. Red Talon signing off. In the control tower, General Hayes watched on radar as the 50 remaining civilian aircraft scattered to airports across the region, their navigation systems finally free from electronic interference. The hostile reinforcements, arriving to find their command structure destroyed and their mission compromised, turned away rather than engage without coordination. Over the next 2 hours, all 70 civilian aircraft landed safely at various airports. The final count showed that Marcus had saved approximately 4,800 lives, passengers and crew aboard the aircraft that had been trapped in the electronic warfare attack. Marcus's helicopter was found crashed in a remote area, its pilot unconscious but alive. His injuries were severe, but he survived thanks to the advanced safety systems in his aircraft and the quick response of rescue teams. 3 weeks later, Marcus woke up in a military hospital to find his family at his bedside. Sarah was holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. His teenage children, who had barely known their father as anything other than a civilian consultant, looked at him with new understanding of what he had once been. The president wants to see you, Sarah told him. Something about a medal ceremony. Marcus smiled weakly. Just tell him I was doing my job. But Marcus knew it had been more than just a job. It had been a calling. A responsibility to use his unique skills when innocent lives were at stake. The legendary pilot known as Red Talon had returned when he was needed most, proving that heroism isn't about the uniform you wear or the aircraft you fly. It's about the choices you make when everything is on the line. The electronic warfare attack was later determined to have been a test of American air defense capabilities by a foreign military power. The operation had been designed to demonstrate vulnerabilities in civilian aviation systems while gathering intelligence on response procedures. But the attackers hadn't counted on Red Talon. One man's refusal to accept defeat had turned their sophisticated military operation into a complete failure, saving thousands of lives and sending a clear message that America's skies were protected by more than just technology and procedures. They were protected by individuals willing to sacrifice everything for the safety of others. Marcus Rodriguez retired from all flying activities after his recovery, choosing to spend his remaining years with his family. But his story became legend among pilots around the world, proving that when courage meets skill and determination, even impossible odds can be overcome. The sky remembers its heroes, and Red Talon's name will forever be associated with the day one man saved 4,800 lives with nothing more than a damaged helicopter and an unbreakable will to protect the innocent.